G'day, you're listening to the Big Breakdown podcast with Kris, Stafford and Harrison Marshall. Take it away, fellas.
Hello and welcome along to season 2 of the Big Breakdown podcast. We are in our season reflections where we are looking at serial winning coaches and lessons that we can learn in the community game. First of all, Harrison, Merry Christmas. Hope you had a good one. Second of all, I owe you an apology because this was meant to be our first face-to-face recording and then I only got COVID. So that quickly put a pie in that, didn't it? But did you have a good Christmas?
Yes. Oh, well, Merry Christmas to you as well, Kris. Yeah, COVID Kris strikes again. I think that's the second time you've had it?
It is the second time I've had it. Yeah, this one is, this time's a lot different. The best way I've described it to people is it's the equivalent to coming back off a 4-day rugby tour. Just got a really bad hangover, your body aches, and you just question some life choices. Other than that, I feel fine.
Oh, good. Well, good to hear that you're on the mend. What's mad is that 2 years it's been going, and I've luckily not had it. So touch wood, that remains the same. But yeah, I've managed to find a corner of the house somewhere where it's a little bit quieter from the rest of the family, just so we can get a bit of a recording done. So that's why I'm in a different location today.
Well, you have shown us a bit around your work and your flat in Oxford, so it's good to have you back in God's county of Yorkshire. Season 2. Now, I remember when I mentioned the idea of serial winning coaches and the theme to you back in, I think it was May, we sort of had the idea about it. I actually never thought we'd get anywhere near the caliber of guest, or two, the types of discussions that we've ended up having in this series. And I've been really pleased with where it's gone.
Oh, what 100%. I don't think we could even. I totally agree with you. I couldn't even conceive of the magnitude of guests that would be getting on in sport. We're both rugby backgrounds, but to have just the variety of sport come on and variety of different kind of coaching styles and everything come on to this podcast, this episode has I think fundamentally helped me as a coach, and hopefully helped all the listeners as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've recorded with Australia, New Zealand, Wales. We've been all over. But I suppose it brings us back on to sort of what we're trying to do today, is just chat about what lessons we can learn, because that was the whole point of it. It was trying to. A lot of people said that what they liked about season 1 of the pod was that we were actually talking about stuff that was relevant to the grassroots game, when a lot of it tends to focus on what the elite do and leave it at that, when actually even we wanted to take that level a bit further. What can we actually learn from that? What can we take away from it? And that's what we tried to do with each of the 9 guests that we've had on. I suppose first and foremost, we need to just go back to September with Sergio and actually talk about what is a serial winning coach? What does that mean, and actually what does that look like?
Yeah, so in terms of the definition that we use for the study, the criteria for selection into the study were very, very stringent. Really, you had to have won repeatedly at the highest level, and by the highest level we mean Olympics and professional and top tier professional leagues. Okay, and by winning we mean winning, not a silver medal, not a bronze medal. Okay, not a runner-up, winning the whole thing. And you had to have done that repeatedly over a sustained period of time, but also with different teams or different athletes. So to give you an example, someone that didn't qualify at the time of the study would have been, Rafa Nadal, the tennis player. So his coach wouldn't qualify because his coach only coached Rafa Nadal. Okay, we wanted to make sure that we were looking at coaches that were able to win with different athletes or different teams or in different situations, really. And that's the definition, really, someone that has won at the highest level. Absolutely. So we build this model really of practice of the serial winning coach around 3 ideas: the idea of vision, the idea of people, and the idea of the environment. And kind of all around these 3 ideas, there's also the idea of the coach, of myself, okay, of who I am. and my personal values, my personal beliefs around life and coaching, my what sometimes people call my philosophy.
So people, vision, environment, and philosophy, they were the key themes for this season. And it kind of they're all four key things that the grassroots coach can relate back to, and I think that's four important themes there that Sergio identified in his study.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I think like we said throughout season 1 and in season 2, winning and success is different for every environment. So, yes, he's in his study. He looked at serial winners. The people are at the top of their game, winning gold medals at the Olympics, winning league titles for multiple different clubs at top tier of their sport. But then I think what's really important we reiterate, and we did it throughout the season, is that winning and success is different for every environment. And it goes back to understanding what we did in season 1, who, what, and how are the fundamentals, and then you can layer on the kind of things that we've discussed in this series. So, they are pivotal for every coach, whether it's grassroots, development, elite. And I think it is important that there are elements that we consider, and we'll go into that a little bit more depth as we speak over the next.
Well, that's the key bit, because if as a grassroots coach you take little bits of them things that we've just said there and what we're going to go through in the rest of this episode, winning for you could just be having 35 people training on a Tuesday and Thursday night. That's a win for me. I much prefer coaching them numbers than turning up with 12 and 7, because you eventually run out of things to do. You want to be doing games that are got a bit of chaos to them that players can enjoy. And plus, if you've got that many people coming down, it shows that you're doing something right, and that's winning in itself. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily need to translate to results. Probably will transition to results on a field, because you've got more people training, more people are enjoying it, more people are there. But that comes as a byproduct of having all these other things in place. I think in order to understand the other ones first, we need to go back to episode 2 with Phil Davies around philosophy and why philosophy is important. And just here's a clip of what Phil had to say.
As well, and I've been involved with some interesting coaches as well. So over that period, I think what I've learned is it's so important to have a people-centered approach, or player-centered, if you like, development-driven, and then competition-ready. So you always know your players, or get to know your players, not just on the field but off the field, and what makes them tick, and know about their families and their work-life balance if they are semi-pro, for example, and then try to develop them. Put good monitoring, good analysis, good coaching practices in place so people can see that they're developing. Give them targets, give them ideas of what success looks like for the team, and what are the key parts they play within that, their key roles within that. And then make sure that they're ready to play in the competition, that they're ready, whether it's a Rugby World Cup or whether it's a Premiership match or a Heineken Cup match. Give them an understanding of what that competition is, and prepare them and get them ready for it. So it's people-centered, development-driven, and competition-ready. That's my philosophy. And when I put programs together, or when we put programs together, the coaching staff or the key staff at a club or an international team, those are the 3 real key elements that underpin our planning, our process, and our operational process. And then our review process, Kris. So that's it in a nutshell, really.
I did move straight away from playing into coaching, and at one point realized that I missed the communication and management skills necessary to be a good coach. So I took some years off actually coaching a team and moved into some management positions at companies to learn that. And I guess, I have been lucky to have had the best. We all go to courses, and we do all, coaching courses and that sort of stuff. But I really I was lucky enough to have really good coaches along the way that I could really pick out which areas I would take with me as a coach, and which areas I wouldn't take and use that made me a better player back then. So I guess, you know, I've had some very good coaches in the past who were coaches of empathy, who were coaches that taught me to be a better person, coaches who were very hard, coaches who were very progressive in their coaching. And I was really able to pick out of each of these different coaches, what the best was for me as the person I am.
And so when you wake up and you've got a coaching day, or when you finish work and you're going to your wet Wednesday night coaching, you know, you've chosen to coach. You've chosen to coach. And so there is an onus on you to, some days you're going to feel great and you just go and do it. And bang, you're in your, what I would perhaps call your coach face. Your coach face. Other days it's an effort to get there. And so what I would say to coaches listening in, just as I say to players when I work on a technique I call a game face, which is basically, to throw some jargon at you, is some psychological jargon at you, is based on Albert Bandura's self-efficacy theory and Yuri Hahn's individual learn of optimal functioning. Mouthful. Let's just call it a game face, right? Let's call it a coach face. You need a coach face. Now you could build a coach face in a very simple way, through your memory, through your imagination, through your perception. Memory. Think about you at your best. Think about your best coaching. What are your best coaching moments? What did that look like? What did that feel like? What did others see when you were at your best? Imagination. What's your dream coaching session look like? Feel like? What will others see when you're coaching 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10, 12 out of 10, whatever that means? Perception. Who do you want to be as a coach? How do you want to go about your business as a coach? What do you want others to see, to experience? Memory, imagination, perception.
So I think that was really well described by Phil there in terms of what his philosophy is and what he's learned over his journey so far.
Yeah, and I think in that episode he really went on to elaborate the kind of experiences that he went through as a coach in order to get there. It wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't this is my philosophy, I'm going to stick with it. And and if you get a chance to go back and listen to that episode, you would really begin to understand that it's a continuous process. And he's got to this point in which it's player centered, development driven, and competition ready through all the experiences that he's had by other coaches that influence him as a player. Other coaches in terms of the S&C, the physios, the nutritionists, the video analysis guys. They've all kind of come in together and helped shape and evolve his philosophy throughout his coaching journey. And I think that was I love that episode of Phil right at the start, because I think that really kind of set up the series in terms of where we wanted to go as two coaches ourselves and podcast hosts.
Well, as well, and I think what Phil really articulated well was how he then used his philosophy when he went into somewhere like Namibia in terms of trying to drive their level of high performance up. So he didn't just go in and immediately throw his philosophy in and that's what they were doing. He tried to did it with a conference. He tried to gauge their level of what they saw high performance as to then what his is, and then try and find the meeting point sort of in the middle within that. And shows that his philosophy had that flexibility in terms of, because it's so focused around people, like you said, development and then competition ready, it allows him to mold himself into the environment that he's in, which I think it allows him to reflect that a little bit more, which I think is an important part of your philosophy. You've got to be able to reflect. Yeah,
and I think and that's so useful for coaches at all aspects of their sport. That reflection and understanding how you want to coach as an individual coach, and actually learning and sharing and speaking with other coaches is absolutely massive. And you go back to that reflection point, and I think that little clip of Alison and Anne in the middle there summarise that as well. First of all, her bravery to come on to a podcast and say, when she first went to coaching, she felt that her communication skills weren't quite up for the standard of what she thought of herself as a coach. Now then, she went away into business, into management, and she learned her skills elsewhere. So once again, you know, that's a coach, that's an elite level coach that's going, right, I've got a weakness here. I want to go and speak to someone. I'm going to try something new, and hopefully I can come back. And obviously, it's turned out to be a success. Or you wouldn't be winning an Olympic gold medal in 2021, would you?
Exactly. But I mean, that the whole idea of philosophy and reflection, I think they do go hand in hand, because philosophy isn't just a linear journey, is it? I think Phil articulated it. You go in multiple different ways. Alison described, actually, it's not A to B, it's A with a diversion to C, and round the houses. There isn't that straight level line. You need to have an idea where you're going, but be willing to adapt to go around it. And what I really liked in Dan's episode was that notion of that coach face, but you could actually use that notion of a coach face to bring your philosophy to life.
Yeah. Oh, and I think, you know, both you and I have spoken about this several times since that chat with Dan.
That Dan blew my mind, in all fairness. Like, it literally fried my head. He just engaged well. He with the way he talked, the way he described his things. I was just like, I need to write this down. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, 100%. And yeah, like you said, that coach face stuck with both you and I. So, you know, both massively, and I think and I think it has with a lot of the listeners and a lot of other people. And if you listen to it now, you know, once again, go back and listen to Dan Abraham's episode 8, because, you know, he's talking about understanding ourselves, and he said, you know, basically it's all right for us to feel crap. For us as coaches, it's all right for us to, you know, to have an off day. You know, we might be, you know, you talked about it on a wet Tuesday night, and you get 30 players. You know, if you're lucky to get 30 players, but you've had an absolute crap day at work, you know, you had your ear chewed off once you got back in the house, you know, but we've got to, as coaches, our responsibility to make sure that the players are, you know, they're engaging, they're participating, they're enjoying it. And are they going to enjoy it if we're stood there look like we're chewing a wasp? No. So we've got to make sure that we've got our coach face on, similar to players when they go and play and they have the game face. We have our coach face on, and I loved his example of, for him, it was Jurgen Klopp, wasn't it? Yeah. Energetic Jurgen Klopp, and you know, those kind of key messages that went around in his head were, yeah, and you know, and I've used it, and I'm not ashamed to say that I've used it, because it's helped me no ends.
Agreed. It just gets you to, because the look of it is, you know, your dream, where you see yourself going. You automatically give yourself, it's weird. You just give yourself this boost. It's really one of the most useful techniques I've been given in the last few years. You can give all the science, all the literature that I've read. That's probably been one of the biggest helps recently. But I think that brings us back around to the start of what Phil's bit was around people first. And people's been a massive feature of every episode, I think.
Yeah. Oh, and 100%, and not just in season 2, in season 1 as well. You know, I think, you know, when we first set out doing the podcast, you know, nearly a year ago now, last back in February, you know, when we broke it down into, you know, how we understand coaching and understanding of who, what, and how. Understanding of who has appeared in absolutely every single episode I think we've done, and it is such, you know, a pivotal part of coaching, and it underpins everything. That, you know, if you don't understand who you're coaching, who you're working with, how on earth can you get the best out of them? And I think we've got a good number of clips here throughout season 2 to really emphasize the importance of understanding your who.
Again, it's the awareness. Once you've got your shit sorted out, what's the awareness of them? Hey, what are you doing for a job? Or how are your studies going? Or, you know, it might be 15-year-olds. Oh, tell me about your school. What are some of the other interests? What other sports do you play? Now, they don't have to be done in a formal way. I'd challenge every coach that if you couldn't, in the space of 10 minutes, have a 60-second conversation with 10 people and just wander around the changing rooms, pat on the back. Hey, how did school go today? What did you study? How did, now you love riding your BMX bike. Tell me, how's that going?
When you start with your players or your athletes, you're the light. that's lighting the path, because they don't know where they're going. You've got to give them a certain direction. It's far more directive and instructive at that point, right? Once you've got that in motion, the next level is you've got to give them the light so that they see where they're going. Right? The next level after that is you've got to learn how to be the mirror that reflects their light even stronger. And finally, you've got to step out the light, right? Because you're making shadows. So I think you have to be willing to go on that journey and to be able to understand when there is a next stage, but that doesn't stop you, given this or that situation, to go back to directive. If you're needing action, very often you have to be directive. If you're needing thinking, for sure you're stepping back and giving them time and silence to think and to work it out. So these are, I mean, one of the greatest gifts you must have as a coach is judgment. You've got to be able to apply judgment to situations in front of you.
I use an analogy here in New Zealand. I talk to coaches and I have a couple of slides, and one I've got some mushrooms and the other one I've got a silver fern glistening in the sun. And I say, hey, do we treat our athletes like mushrooms, keep them in the dark and feed them bullshit? Or do we treat them like silver ferns where we water them and allow the sunlight to get on them? And how do you coach? And, you know, for too long, I grew up in the 60s, 70s, 80s. I was coached by some interesting people in rugby, a prominent rugby, where you get this. And you had no idea what practice was going to look like. You were kept in the dark and fed bullshit. You read about whether you got picked or dropped in the newspaper. You never got a phone call. I mean, it was pretty, and some of that still exists. So, you know, that's my analogy, I guess. Grassroots, no different. Find out, treat these young people like silver ferns, and I know you have ferns in England. I know that. You know, shed some light on them and feed them, nurture them, give them water, show interest. Yeah.
You look at personalities and how do you put teams together? You know, do we want an entire team of sheep? You're not going to win with an entire team of sheep. Do you want an entire team of micromanagers or leaders? You can't. Do you want an entire team of introverts? You can't. But what one of the most wonderful things is if you put introverts in a rugby team and give them a sense of identity and give them a voice, introverts become some of the most amazing leaders. I mean, look at a Johnny Wilkinson, you know, one of the players that overthought every single detail of his game and, you know, has left, you know, highly identifiable scars mentally, and he's now reprocessing it. But yet in that pressure cooker, I mean, go to his go to his Toulouse speech, you know, one of the most inspirational moments as a leader, and yet totally introverted. Drop him into a public, you know, arena, and he'll go right to the wall. And that's one of the most, you know, it's one of the most complex things about being a coach, is you've got to read your players. I remember the first time I started coaching Islander boys, I couldn't believe how things that I take incredibly seriously, you know, if I was giving them a spray about missing an attacking opportunity, they would think it's funny, because when you yell at them, sometimes they just think it's funny. And yet things that I take incredibly lightheartedly, they take incredibly seriously. I remember I used to have like a really neat fade, right? And one of the boys got and he'd obviously asked for it too short. And, you know, it was kind of that past the point where it almost gets to like a top knot. And I was like, Lecky, that you got butchered, my man. And he just face dropped and went off, and he was bawling his eyes. He came back the next day, had cut it all off. And I sort of thought, oh my God. And what I didn't realize is that, you know, he was really self-conscious about him and he didn't feel emotionally strong within that structure where someone could give him a bit of a jab. And I thought, you know, wow, hang on a sec, I've got to rethink this. How do how do I soften, how do I bring this guy into it so he's comfortable in that situation? So it's the most, it's why I love coaching, because it's so complex and yet you have to be able to simplify things.
Well, certainly plenty of interesting comments, observations there from when talking about people. I think, that's just a few of them. I think looking back at the series, we can get bits from absolutely every single episode. But then, we want you to go back and listen to them. So
I think from a grassroots perspective, people, as well as the elite one, it's the bit that we get so worked up on the tech, the tack, the league positions, when actually the reality is it don't. They don't mean anything. It's the people that are the club that make that sports club, whether you're rugby, whether you're football, whether you're cricket. It's the people there that keep it afloat. They're the ones that put the money behind the bar. They're the ones that turn up and keep it going. So they have to be in the centre of everything in order to keep the club going. Otherwise, the club's just not going to be there anymore.
Exactly.
And that's why it's got to be a priority.
Oh, definitely. I couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more, Chris. And that's not a phrase you'll hear me say too often. And I think, to summarise that, the first clip there from Rich there was spot on. We go back to, we just want our philosophy, but can we once us as coaches get our shit in order, to put it politely, then can we look to have that awareness of the people that we're dealing with? And I love the challenge, and I apply it to my coaching. Once again, it's something I apply as well now, and I apply it to my coaching now. I will spend 10 minutes before every session, and I will try and have a conversation with at least 6 different people. Ideally 10, like he says, 10 1-minute conversations, but at least 6, because sometimes they overrun, because you get caught up in for me, you get caught up in the gossip of what goes on in school.
And in fairness, with the programs that we're both working in, the numbers are, the 60 lads rock up to train on a Monday night. Just get around 10 of them is sometimes hard because there's just that many bodies there. But you're right, it's that little few minutes of the time that's chatting. How's your study going? How are you finding X, Y, Z? You just get to know them a little bit better, and when you get to know what makes them tick, that actually brings the rugby to life that little bit more.
Oh, definitely. Definitely not just rugby, Chris.
I was going from our own perspective, but whichever sport you're, if you're just an individual athlete that's doing, javelin, you can spend as many 10-minute conversations as you want.
Definitely, but it goes back to that message. Understand the participants. Understand your athletes. Empower them. Listen to them. All of a sudden, their engagement increases. Their willingness to work for you increases. Their willingness to enjoy the environment. Get to know you as a coach as well, and you share those vulnerabilities with them. That creates that bond, and that links quite nicely into what Frank discussed within that. For us as coaches, it's our job to empower them, give them the information for them to start using it back to us, reflect back to us as if we're the mirror, before we then step out the light and allow them to shine. And I think what was quite interesting in terms of that conversation we did have with Frank, he challenged us a little bit to think about what do we get out of coaching, and both of us said the interpersonal skill, the interpersonal elements of speaking with people, and the fact that we still chat with people that are long gone out of the program, because both you and I like and enjoy that interpersonal part of what sport is.
Yeah, and I think it was fundamentally reinforced with what Jack said in his clip, because we're not all perfect. You can get to know as many players you want, but then you can make that comment that you think might be quite funny that actually can have quite an impact on someone in a different way. And that is also another emphasis of why we need to have these conversations outside of the sport with our players, to know what makes them tick or what's going to get them upset, because that was a real learning moment for Jack, and he had to go away and do some reflection on that around how he spoke, or some of the humour that he used that you might be able to get away with 9 out of 10 players, but it's just that one that ended up going and changing his whole haircut because of it.
Yeah, but I think that also what's quite interesting about that as well, though, Chris, is that it shows that we're dealing with human beings, and you and I both know from our own personal experiences as well as players that we've coached that humans are complex beings, you know, and we're never perfect, you know, and we will make mistakes, whether that be, you know, a joke that goes a tad too far, but as long as, you know, like with Jack's example, and like we said here, as long as there's good intentions behind it, and you've already built up that rapport with your player, and then you reflect and you can get over those kind of things, that only strengthens that bond. And yes, you know, Jack was incredibly brave and honest to come and share that experience with us, but you know, I think it's an eye opener that, you know, we're allowed to cock up, we're allowed to make mistakes, but it's what we do to reflect and change and make sure those mistakes don't happen again.
Yeah, I think the key message was from Richard was just get your shit in order. Once you've got your shit in order, everything else will come together. And I think that brings us on to the next bit around vision. Because once you've got your shit together, that's when you can start focusing on the vision. So here's some key clips from people articulating of how vision has influenced their program.
Understanding what it is they're trying to achieve, what they want out of it, but also then understanding the context in which you're working. Then that begins, as you say, that you begin to then say, well, what is it I am either able to or want to do in that context? So that you then start thinking in terms of that sets the limits of your expectations. Now, that's not me saying don't have higher expectations, don't constantly aim to be the best. Everybody should be aiming to do as well as they can and to be the best. But there will be some situations in which, for example, if I give this example of from my own experience, if you're working twice a week in a team context, and individuals may be working on their own, doing physical stuff or other stuff as well, but largely the team would be coming together on a couple of occasions a week. That does limit what you might achieve over a long period of time. That's very different from those who are working twice a day on a full-time basis, or 3 times a day on a full-time basis.
Look at all those different things. What were the standards of some of the top tier 2 teams between number 15 and number 20 in the world? Because maybe we were number 24 when we started. So we started to look then at performance metrics of what teams looked like and where we actually were and where the gaps were. So we created a gap analysis, and then we used a traffic light system over 4 years to close the gaps. So we went from red players to amber players to green players. So green players were 80% towards a target, amber were 50+%, and red were under 50%. And then we looked at performance metrics of high-speed meters, strength in the gym, power. Then we looked at tackle technique. We looked at basic skills. We looked at ability to keep the ball. You know, all that sort of stuff became our sort of strategic and operational plan, and our hearts and minds plan in order to move forward to be competitive in the World Cup. Autocratic in the beginning, but then as we move forward, it became more democratic, if you like. And we, you know, I loved it in the end, mate. I loved the players. I got to know their families, and it was just amazing. But you have to have, sometimes when you go into a sort of a moving feast, or you go into a lot of grey, you've got to create that black and white in the first instance to move forward, and then, you know, you build from there.
In March of 2013, and we had a trials in April for the World Championships that year that were in Barcelona in July of 2013. So that first few months, there was no changes. It was getting out to performance centres, getting on deck with coaches and athletes, visiting, watching, looking who was there, looking who we needed to work with, why we needed to work with them. And then through the World Championships, when we were ready for that September, was to then make some fairly critical decisions in the September of 2013 that we would then implement across the whole program. And things like on-track times came in board after that first year. So we had an opportunity to try and talk to people, educate, tell them how it was going to work before we actually did it. And that's kind of more of an ongoing process. You have to continue to do that while refining what you do, because if we just continue to do what we did in 2013, we'll get behind as well. So it's a matter of always looking for how that's going to evolve into the future.
The key learning I found with Vision was that it goes back to what we spoke about a lot in season 1 and referenced quite heavily in 2 around what works for whom, what circumstance and why. Your vision needs to be relevant to the environment that you're going to be working in. And, you know, there's some really powerful points there from Phil, John and John around that. You know, John Lyle spoke about understanding your domain and where you are and what you're working in. But then Phil talked about how, you know, you can compare yourself to the top, but what can we learn from them to do with us? And I think that's probably a key thing that, you know, a lot of grassroots, for the Magpies that see what's going on in the elite game, how do we take that and use that to us? Or what do we take from them and apply with us? And I think that was quite a powerful thing from Phil.
Yes. I think one massive step for me from Phil there was, you know, he said when he went into Namibia, he didn't, you know, he felt that, you know, he could be quite autocratic at the start, you know, which probably, you know, might go against his original player-centered approach. However, you know, what he's finding when he goes in there is that the idea between what high performance was that Namibia thought and where Phil worked at, where there was a big disparity there. So he's actually gone in, you know, and once again, if you go back and listen to the episode, you know, he just talks about, you know, he goes in there, understands their culture. He's gone in there, he's spoken to what they want to get out of it, what they perceive high performance is, you know, and he, you know, and you have to, and he talks about having to bring, you know, players up to that level. And so once again, he's gone in, he's understood his environment. He's understood what's required of him, and he's adjusted his philosophy to create this vision in which he begins to be quite autocratic. But then, you know, he comes in with that green, that traffic light system, you know, which goes into that player-centered development driven, and you know, competition-ready approach, because he's allowing these players to progress into the red, from red to amber, from amber to green. So when they did go to the World Cup in 2015 and 2019, you know, they did well.
Yeah, and sometimes it does need it. Like, I mean, I referenced in Richard's episode around how Vern Cotter, when in Scotland, did a similar approach. He came in and was very autocratic, dictated where they needed to be and how they were going to get there. But by year 3, he'd be able to give more ownership to the players, and that would then drive the vision of how they wanted to play and where they wanted to go. But that's kind of a different approach to how John Atkinson found it, because he wanted to listen and observe, then act upon what he'd seen. He wanted to learn about the program and then make the changes that needed to in order to progress Canada on from where they were. And I think that is the important thing with vision. You need to be able to walk in confidently in knowing what your own skills are to the environment that you've got there, and try and work out what's going to be best to make that successful. Just because it works somewhere else doesn't mean it's going to work in the new one. And I think that's got to be clear with your vision. It needs to be appropriate for where you're going into next. And I think Phil touched on it with it, where if they're not aligned, if your vision's not aligned to what you want to get out of it, then don't do it. Oh
yeah, definitely. I think, you know, what you found with you know, with John Atkinson in his example is that, you know, the year that he went in, you know, I think by all accounts he didn't do very much with the World Championships that year, because he started, and it goes back to a phrase that we've used before and we've heard lots of times as coaches, he started with that end in mind, and his end for that vision and that cycle was Tokyo 2021. You know, so he's that first year, I'm literally going to observe. I want to see what I've got here to offer. I see what's on offer, and then I'll start to begin to work and make those key decisions after those World Championships, just so I then, you know, so he knows how the system works over there. And once you know how the system works, you know which changes you can bring in. But if we were to apply this to the grassroots game, it goes straight back to what John Lyle was saying. You have to understand the domain that you're in. Now, we can sit here and we can talk about the Olympics. We can talk about Phil working with Namibia going to a Rugby World Cup. But how does that affect someone on a Tuesday night? Well, if you don't understand that you're just coaching under 8s on a Sunday morning, from a rugby perspective, they don't need the vision of what you're going to do in 4 years' time to get them through a World Cup, because they're only going to be 12. But you've got to have the vision and understanding that in 12 years' time, in 4 years' time when they are 12, do they have those fundamental movement skills that we touched on in season 1, episode 2 with Christian Sharples?
Well, that goes back to, if you are looking at this from a grassroots perspective, then it's everything we spoke about with Steve around building that curriculum or a syllabus. Is your vision should be, well, actually, can I predict where the game's going to be going in terms of its development? How can I predict what my players need? That should be my vision. If that's the level that I'm working to, it's not, I think it is different across other sports, because some sports have, for some bizarre reason, leagues and competitive leagues at certain age groups. When rugby, the leagues don't start till 17, 18. So it's a bit easier for you to get away with that because you've not got that pressure. But Stuart touched on that the grassroots coach has the hardest job on the touchline on a Sunday, because every parent's telling you that they can probably do it better. But if you, like Richard said, have got your shit in order and you've got your vision that is then articulated to everybody that's there, and everyone knows the direction that this bus is going to go on, it's a lot easier to get that buy-in to then transition in what you're going to be doing next, and people more accept the potential changes or direction that you're doing. I think that's key. It's communicating why you're doing what you're doing, how you're going to do it, and then going out and delivering it.
Oh, exactly. And it goes back to, once again, it goes back to what we've kind of discussed before, but that's not just managing down to potentially players and their parents, it's also managing up to to maybe committee members or board members, depending on how high you are, that everyone is on board with the vision and, the vision of what you're trying to create at that club. And, I think that links, quite nicely into, the kind of last component of how do we create that environment. And, here's a good number of clips once again, just to summarize, what the key messages, key takeaways from environment in and throughout season 2.
One of my key messages is that there are very different domains that coaches operate in. So if you're operating in the high performance, let's just call it performance, but if you're operating in performance to high performance domains where the expectations are higher, you're working with individuals who are already committed to the process. And the commitment to the process means that they can be more intensively engaged, and they will engage with the environment that you produce. So if you have high expectations and high demands in that environment, you're working with those who are already committed and see some reward at the end of it. Before you get to that stage, if you're working with in what I would call a more participation, children's often, usually children, but you can be adults as well. The level of reward there is more immediate. The level of reward is that I need to be able to enjoy myself, because if I don't enjoy myself, I'm not coming back. The coach has to work harder to create an environment in which there is greater variety, there's greater immediate success, that individuals can feel engaged.
In coaching, when we coach, it's really narrowed down to 3 P's: participation, progression, and performance. Participation, progression, and performance. So by participation, I'm talking about the engagement piece. We've got to help players engage in our activities, in every activity in our sessions, in every session, every week, every month, every season, and hopefully for a lifetime. Maybe. And then we've got the second P, progression. Most coaches, if not all, are probably invested in learning and growing, helping their people, their players to learn and helping their players to grow. Certainly the learning, whether a coach under 6s, 7s and 8s is helping children to learn, might be, some will say, no, free play, but then that's their prerogative, and others will say, well, yeah, I want to help introduce some fundamentals, if I can use that word, in the game, and that's a debate that goes on out there. But the vast majority of coaches are invested in helping people to learn and maybe to grow as people as well. You know, people coach because they tend to like people or be invested in people, and so helping somebody grow as a person is a big part of it. So that progression piece, so participation is engagement, progression is to learn and to grow, and then performance. Performance for me is the competing side of things. And again, we can go back to, well, maybe we don't want a 10-year-old to worry too much about performance. And again, there's big debates there, but certainly at certain levels, competing is a skill. So we want to help our people, our players, to be able to compete, to be able to perform.
Have the ownership of what we do. So, you know, they're owners of our progress. They're owners of our success. I think the key thing is not to change too much. You know, we've had the same principles for 4.5 years. We haven't changed our principles. We haven't changed the way we approach the game. We haven't changed the way we play the game. We've added small things. You know, we brought in the Ringelmann effect a few years ago. And the Ringelmann effect, I don't know if you guys know that is, if you have two people that play tug of war against each other, you'll do, you know, both of you will have 100% effort. But every time someone gets added to your team, you just give that little bit less effort. And we talked about, okay, well, if that means that it'll be 60% effort against 60% effort, no, that might be difficult. But if we continually play at an effort of being on my own at 100%, we'll always have a 40% benefit from our team, the opposition, without doing more. So it's all about getting the very best out of every single player. That's what your job is, not to create new things, not to keep adding new things, to keep as simple as possible, but to be able to get every single time you're on the field, you're together to get the best out of every single player. That's your job. And I think most people would be surprised when I don't complicate things. Simple is difficult enough. Simple, you know, driving from A to B is difficult enough because you have people unexpectedly walking in front of the car, and the sun's shining in your eyes. It might be raining. That, you know, the babies might be crying in the back of the car. There are all these different things, but you still have to drive from A to B. And if I change the way you drive and tell you have to drive with your left hand and you're right-handed, or you add all these different things to just the simple getting in the car and driving from A to B, that's difficult. So why do we change all those elements of the basic elements of playing the game? Because there's already external things that will influence your way of playing. So we focus on very simple things. We focus on doing them very well. And all of the unexpected things that happen coming our way, we learn to deal with.
Is this whole notion of what I call disruption. You've got to be able to disrupt your thinking. So for example, and companies like Google, Microsoft, Lego, these guys, they're well on top of this. And I'd like you to think of it like Newton's cradle, right? You know, Newton's cradle, the 5 balls that are suspended. You take one off one end, and you call that disruption, right? What is disruption? Well, we have a meeting like we're having right now with our own team, with our own top coaches for the club or for the nation, and we say, okay, forget what we're doing, how we're working, and what we're doing at the moment. What could we do, right? What if? Why not? What are the possibilities with the skills and the bits and pieces of resources we have to do something completely differently? And so we disrupt, right? Then, and as you disrupt, you go from what I think Google call it a green scene to a red scene. And the red scene is, what will you do with all that the stuff that you just talked about? What will you do? What will we be? What will we become? And you then commit to that. So you disrupt the ball off there, you let it go, comes back, hits the first ball, and you dream. that transfers into the third ball, and you design, right? Sorry, it comes in. You start off disrupting. You then I usually got my diagram in front of me here. You start off disrupting. You dream. You decide. You design, and the ball that flies off the other end is you deliver. But bear in mind that ball's going to come back again. So you don't do this just once. You're doing this, okay, randomly, if you like, but certainly 2 or 3 times in a year.
And there we have it, the key takeaways from season 2 of the environment. I think the one that stood out for me on that last one there was probably Frank on that last clip. He really begins to bring vision and the environment together there, Kris.
Definitely, and they are aligned, because the environment is what's going to help bring your vision to life. If you can get that environment right, and Frank articulated that really simplistically, as did Dan, and I think Dan with his 3 Ps kind of just give you a foundation for how you can set up all of your practice, really.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. And I think I like that idea of what Google used, of that Newton's cradle, of the four balls that are swinging. You're looking at a disruption. What's disrupting the session? Can we dream? Then can we deliver and watch it come back. I think that's that sums it up perfectly in terms of linking the two together.
But I think some of it as well comes down to what Alison kind of discussed in her episode, was that they've had the same real process of doing things for the last 4.5 years, still winning gold medals. But it's the intensity that they bring to the session and the simplicity of how they've broken down the game that allows them to train at an intensity level that brings them success, that everyone comes up to their sessions focused to just train as hard as they can at game intensity to get the best out of it. And that then connects back around to people, of how Alison's got the people well aligned to how they want to play and what they want to do, that they can just train at real intensity to then bring the rest of it together. Because what she said was it's not really difficult. It's a simple way to try and play hockey was around the speed of how they want to do everything, and can they be quicker than everybody else. And I think that's key for that. If you want a successful environment, is train how you want to play.
Oh, spot on. And I think,
in fact, ignore the rest of the bits I just said. Just leave that bit in.
Yeah, simplifying it there. But then it also goes back to the environment she's created. So she's very much empowering her players. There's no curfews. There's no, there's no rules. There's no rules to it. That that is very much developed. It's very much driven from the players, and she's empowered those players to want to come to the sessions. That first of all, they're representing the countries, because of course they're wanting to go, but that want and willingness to push each other on, within those sessions.
John said that they don't have to be in the stands cheering people on if they've got other stuff that's going to help them prepare to get the best out of their swim. That's still linked to the high performance environment that Swimming Canada have, and that's the same thing. It's not just on field; it's the off field stuff as well.
Exactly.
But on pool, I don't know what the difference would be there.
In the pool, out the pool, yeah. But they're the environments in which I think first of all the athletes are more likely to buy into it, because of there's that. Yes, it's competitive, but that empowerment of self. We as human beings, we don't like being told that we have to do something. We like we're in this. We're playing. For example, she's got athletes that play hockey because they love the sport and they're good at it. So, of course, when they go and play and represent their country, there's an expectation, and I think that's what Alison has driven at home with her environment. That there's an expectation that you have to train that intensity, and that's what's so great about it. And once again, similar to vision, it goes back to that first clip with John Lyle. You've got to understand who you're coaching and the environment that you're in. because we can be in a domain that has got no relevance. We don't, what's the point in a Sunday league football coach imprinting curfews on their players the night before when it's just Sunday league football? Those players are not going to buy into what that coach wants. They all want to go. They all want to go have a piss up on a Saturday night. Why? That's the environment and the domain that you're in very much filters into the vision, the kind of the people that you're working with, and then the philosophy of how you are as a coach.
I've seen so many rugby coaches that have come into a season and said, right, no train, no player policy, and it lasts to probably game one, because then they realise that they've not got players to pick from. You've got to have that flexibility in the grassroots game. You can't rock up and say no train, no play, because again, it goes back to the players there for the club. There's valid reasons why some people can't train. They've got job commitments, other things come, life gets in the way sometimes, and that, especially now post-COVID, I think that's something that a lot of coaches within the community game are juggling, is people being regularly available. But if you get that training environment right, on and off field, you're communicating with your players about, well, why aren't you training? What is the reason behind it? Could it be something that you might be able to help with from your experiences? And if they bought into the vision, you're gonna, you might get that change in turnaround of more players turning up, more people wanting to put that effort in, and that could be the simple fix of how to re-engage players. And I think there's so many more clips that we could have put in for environment, as with people, that coaches could have taken things away to apply in their environments. And that's what's been, I think, really special about this season, is every episode there's been a little bit of people vision environment, even though they've been specifically focused on one of the elements. There's been a little bit of a sprinkling of all of them in each.
Yeah, and that's why I have absolutely loved recording this season, because I think it's helped my development personally as a coach. On a selfish note, I think it will help so many coaches that are listening. I think it's just been great. First of all, go back to what we said at the start of this episode. It's just been great to have the caliber of guests on that coming on and being brave and sharing their stories, and sharing what they've learned and the mistakes that they've made, and where they've got to. But like you just said there's nuggets of gold in absolutely every single episode, and I implore anyone who's listening now to go back and give this season a listen if you haven't picked up some of the episodes already, because trust me, you will learn something.
And I think the key thing is like we talk about the elite being all the way up here, when actually what they're doing isn't rocket science. It's not. You don't need to be working with elite players to do it. The only thing that they get more than your grassroots coach is time, and they are usually traditionally the better players that have just come through the system beforehand. That is the only difference for me. It comes down to them two key features. You can still implement a professional environment with a small p. You can still have it as professional. It just doesn't have to be full-time professional. It's just something that people buy into. It's a direction. It's a mindset of how you're going to achieve what you determine what success is going to look like in your environment, and roll with that, and sprinkle a little bit of what we've learned this season to that, and you can achieve that quite easily. But it's not rocket science at all. Basically, look after your people and don't be a dickhead. Know where you want to go and how you're going to get there, and create high quality training environments.
And there's the tagline.
Yeah, that's season 2. Don't be a dick.
Yeah, and in layman's terms, you're not far wrong there, Chris. You're not far wrong.
I've got to bring it down to my level somehow.
Yeah, no, spot on. I think you hit the nail on the head. Hit the nail on the head there.
No, we have it. Season 2 done. We'll be back in a very short break. We'll be back in February with season 3. So look out for our preview season on that later in the new year. Hope you've had a good Christmas. Hope you have a cracking new year, and we'll see you in 2022. Harrison, enjoy your new year.
And you, Chris, thank you very much.
And we will see you next time.
Cheers for listening. Don't forget to join in the discussion at Big Breakdown HQ on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Thank you.